Hey, what's up everyone? It's Michael with Colorcubic, and I'm back again with part 2 of our Cinema 4D tutorial. So where we left off in our last tutorial, we had just finished converting a primitive sphere to an editable sphere. And during that process, we converted the standard type to an icosahedron sphere, which revealed a mesh of triangle polygons that made up the entire sphere. From that point, what we did was we converted the triangle mesh to hexagon mesh, and then from there we extruded the hexagon surface polygons, and then from there we applied the sphere with the extruded hexagon polygons to a subdivision surface hypernerb, which is what we have here. So I'm going to zoom in here real quick just to show you what we're working with, and you can see how the surface works. Now, I did have someone in the comment section, and they asked why I didn't just apply a bump map with this similar pattern instead of, doing the hard surface modeling. And the reason why is because Cinema 4D alone, when you apply pattern textures to to spheres, you get an interesting polarization effect.
Say what?
And I can show you what that looks like real quick. So I'm just going to disable this off the scene. I'm going to re-enable this old sphere onto the scene. And now I'm going to come down to create new material and just drag and drop this new material on this sphere. Now I'm going to double click this material in our objects manager and come down to texture, click these three dots, and I already created just a sample bump map to preview what I'm talking about. So I'm going to apply that. No, that doesn't even need to be placed in the project scene. And you can see here real quick, it has this polarizing effect, and that is not what we want. So if I just click single click this texture in our objects manager, you can see in the projection we have UVW mapping. Now we can change this to spherical. It doesn't really change it much. We can change it to flat. We can change it to cubic. And none of these really work. So you could get it to work with a lot of trial and error, and there have been times when I've had to do that, but I would not recommend it. It takes a long time, and by the time you're done, you're going to be incredibly frustrated. So that is precisely why I did not do that. Instead, I went the route of initiating hard surface modeling in the process from the first video. So with that said, there are solutions that provide an even application of a texture to a sphere. Substance Designer, for those of you who are familiar with Substance Designer, it is a great way to apply even textures across any editable object in Cinema 4D or any 3D model. And it's a relatively affordable program. So if you've never heard of Substance Designer, I would highly recommend you invest in that if you plan on doing a lot of texturing. So with that said, let's go ahead and just pull up Adobe Illustrator, and let's come to File, New, and we want to set our width and height to 2048 pixels by 2048 pixels, just like you see here. And you just want one artboard, and you want your color mode to be RGB. It doesn't really matter actually, but just set it to RGB. And then raster effects, make sure it's set to 72 ppi, and everything else looks good. So go ahead and click OK. Now, the first thing we want to do is we want to pull up our ruler. So if you're on a Mac, press Command R. If you're on a PC, Control R, and you'll see this ruler will pop up in Adobe Illustrator. Next, we want to create a new layer. So if you're on a Mac, press Command L. If you're on a PC, Control L, and that'll create a new layer. And this new layer is going to be our guides layer. So I'm going to lock our first layer and then just double click layer 2 and just rename it to guides. Next, I'm going to press, if you're on a Mac, Command quotation. If you're on a PC, Control quotation, and that'll pull up what you see here as a grid. Next, you want to come up to View, and you want to make sure Smart Guides is turned on as well as Snap to Point. These are important because we need to set guides at the center of this artboard. So before we get started with that, let's go ahead and just grab a guide from the top of our ruler. So just click the top of this and drag down. And you just want to place the first one at the very top of our artboard. So you'll see that blue line there. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And I'm going to drag from the top again and place one at the bottom. Next, I'm going to come over here to the left and drag from the ruler here so we get a vertical guide. I'm going to place that on the left side of the artboard. Do that again and place one on the right side. So they're covering the edges of our artboard. Next, I'm just going to queue up a, it could be an ellipse tool, it can be a rectangle tool, doesn't matter. I'll use a rectangle tool, that's fine. And I'm going to hold down Alt Option and Shift and then click and drag so that it's an even rectangle, or I guess in this case, a square. I'm also going to come over here to our color palettes, and I'm just going to swap these so it's black, and then I'm going to select the white stroke and just eliminate that because we don't need a white stroke. We only need one color, and we're going to be toggling back and forth between the stroke and fill. So with that said, let's come over here to Align, and if you don't see the Align tab, come to Window and just enable Align. You'll see that here. So come to Align and select Horizontal Align Center and Vertical Align Center. Now, if that doesn't work for you, it might be because where it says Align To, it's not set to Artboard. It might be set to Selection. So make sure it's set to Artboard. And that'll center it right in the middle of our canvas. Next, with our square selected, let's come over here to the left side and click and drag from our ruler to bring up another guide. And we'll place that right in the center of this square. And that should snap right in place because we have Snap to Point and Smart Guides turned on. Next, let's come up here to our horizontal ruler and click and drag and bring down another guide and snap that in place to the center of the square. All right, so that's good. Next, what we want to do is we want to come over here to our line segment tool. So go ahead and just select that. And now let's come over here to the upper left part of our canvas, and that should snap right in place. You should see these little words that pop up that say intersected. That's exactly what we want. So from there, just click and drag and bring it all the way down to the adjacent side of this canvas. And again, you should see where it says intersected, and that's perfect. From here, if you're on a Mac, press Command 5, and that'll convert that into a guide. If you're on a PC, select Control 5, and the same thing will happen. It will convert that to a guide. Next, we want to come over here to the upper right side of our canvas where it says intersected, click and drag, and just do the opposite. Bring it to the lower left side of our canvas until it says intersected, and then release that, and then press Command 5 if you're on a Mac, Control 5 if you're on a PC. So now we have these diagonal guides as well as these vertical and horizontal guides. So let's go ahead and lock our guides layer, and let's come down to our layer 1. Now let's come over here to our stroke section, and with our color palettes, just select black, and that will fill in the stroke section. Next, what we want to do is make sure that the line segment tool is selected again. Let's come up here to the center where this guide, the center vertical guide is placed. Make sure it says intersected, and now click and hold down the shift key after you click and just drag down all the way to the bottom. Okay, so now we have a stroke on our canvas, but we want to come up here to where it says stroke, and let's increase this by a value of, let's go ahead and say 50. That looks good. Next, with the stroke selected, let's press Command C if you're on a Mac, Control C if you're on a PC to copy, and then press Command F if you're on a Mac, Control F if you're on a PC, and that will duplicate and place in exactly the same place as the stroke that we just copied. And then press R on your keyboard, and then just rotate this holding Shift, and that will make this vertical. So now we have a vertical and a horizontal stroke. So let's go ahead and lock this, and let's come back to our guides layer. And with our box selected now, let's go ahead and drag this up to the corner until it snaps in place. It should say intersected. And now I'm going to drag this down ever so slightly. It doesn't need to be perfect, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a place where the anchor points that we affect with our guides and our stroke will snap to. And that probably doesn't make any sense to anybody that just heard that, so I apologize. But it will make sense when we do it. So I'm just going to drag it to right there. You can keep it anywhere, honestly. This is just, actually, I'm going to drag it here. This is just a placeholder. Now, I'm going to copy this, so I'm going to hold down the Alt-Option key, and with that held down, I'm going to click and drag, and then I'm going to hold down the Shift key as well, and drag that over until it snaps to the right side. Now I'm going to select both of these squares, and then click and hold down the Alt-Option key, and then the Shift key after I click it to drag until it snaps in place, right there. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and lock our guides layer, and let's come back to our layer 1. And now we're going to grab our pen tool, so you can just press the P key on your keyboard, and that will enable the pen tool. So let's come up to the upper left corner and make sure it says anchor. So just click that once, hold down the Shift key, come down to the center. You should see where it says intersect, and select that. Then come all the way to the bottom left where it says anchor and select that. Now, I forgot to convert this from surface to stroke, so just come over here to the left side of your controls and just swap these. And now it's a stroke. Now, with that selected, make sure to select the stroke. You probably won't see it because the stroke point is 1 and it's pretty thin with our guides on. But if you just drag your mouse over, you should select that stroke. And what we want to do is we want to increase this by a value of 50. So from 1 to 50, if you just hold down the Shift key and increase the value using these arrows, it'll increase it by a value of 10 each time. So just super quick. Or you can just type it in. Doesn't matter. All right, so let's go ahead and duplicate this again. Let's duplicate that process. And with the P key selected on your keyboard, let's come up to the upper right corner of our canvas until it says anchor, and go ahead and press that with your mouse, or if you're using a stylus, hold down the Shift key until you hit the center where it says anchor, press with your mouse, and then come all the way to the bottom right of your canvas until it says anchor, and press with your mouse again. Okay, so we have 2 diagonal strokes in addition to our vertical and horizontal strokes. Next, what we want to do is we want to come down to layer 1 and lock layer 1, and then let's come to our guides layer and unlock our guides layer. Then let's come up to our horizontal ruler and click and drag to reveal a new guide. And let's bring that guide down to the bottom of these top squares. Then let's do the same thing for our bottom squares. Let's grab another guide from our horizontal ruler, click and drag, and place that at the top of the bottom squares. And that should snap right in place because we have smart guides and snap to point turned on. So now that we've done that, let's go back to our guides layer, let's lock our guides layer, and then let's unlock layer 1 again. Next, what we want to do is we want to select this left stroke that is at a 45-degree angle going from left to center and then center to lower left. So upper left to center and then center to lower left. It's all one stroke. So go ahead and select that with your mouse and then press P for the pen tool. And let's see if we can just get this. You know what? I'm just going to select that one. That should be it. Yep, that's it. Okay. So we just want to select the center point. And with that selected, hold down the Shift key, and with the arrow key on your keyboard, with the Shift key held down, count out 10 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And let's see another 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, that looks good. So it's a total of 20 times from center. And now we're going to do the same thing with the right stroke that's coming from upper right to center to lower right. So again, select that center point, and then with the Shift key held down, let's count out 20 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Perfect. All right. So because we have this one selected already, press the P key on your keyboard, and that will bring up the pen tool. And then let's go ahead and mouse over that selection, that center selection of this stroke. And then with our mouse, with our pen tool moused over that selection, hold down the Alt Option key on your keyboard, click and drag down. And then while you're dragging down, also hold the Shift key and drag all the way down until you reach those guides that we set. And just try to set it up as best you can to that guide. There you go. That should snap right in place and say guide. And that looks good. Now go ahead and press the A key and deselect. Let's come back over here to the left stroke. Select that center point. Press the P key on your keyboard, and with the Alt Option key held down on your keyboard, click and drag down with your mouse, and while you're dragging down, hold the Shift key and drag all the way down until you reach that guide at the bottom. And there we go. So now you can deselect. And now we just want to clean this up because we don't need these boxes anymore. So go ahead and just select each box, which we need to go back to our guides layer. And in fact, we can just select the whole guides layer and just delete it. So there we go. Because this is all we want. We just want this. So now that we have this, let's come up to File, Export, and Save for Web. And I'm going to change this. By default, mine is set to GIF. I'm going to change this to PNG-24 and uncheck transparency and save. And just save this in the project path where you have this tutorial saved, or if you're following along, wherever you want to save it, essentially, just as long as you can access this file easily. I am going to rename this to basketball line segments, and then press save. And there we go. So as I mentioned before, for those of you who do not have access to Adobe Illustrator, I'll make that PNG file available for you to incorporate into your scene file in Cinema 4D. For those of you who do have access to Adobe Illustrator, I hope you followed along because this is just a really good exercise. With that said, let's go ahead and go back over to Cinema 4D. All right, so now we're back in Cinema 4D. And without wasting any time, let's come down to Create, New Material, and I'm going to come back over here to our Objects Manager, and I'm just going to reveal the editable sphere that we have. And I'm going to click and drag and drop this new material on top of this sphere, this editable sphere. So now I'm going to double click, and I'm going to come to the Color tab, and then the Texture, I'm going to click those three dots, and I'm going to grab that basketball line segment that we have, and then just select Open. I don't need to save this in the project path. For you, you can do that if you'd like. So right away, you can see this is all just kind of torn up and looks really awful, and that's fine. However, what we want to do is we want to come back to this material and just select it once. And let's come down to the project section, and with this drop-down menu, change this from UVW mapping to flat. And look at what happened. It applied that texture, that line texture, to reveal a seamless basketball line segment. But we're not quite done yet because we've got a few things that we need to fix. First and foremost, what we need to do is we need to create a duplicate sphere that doesn't have any of these bumps to the surface. So let's come back over. First, let's come back to our Objects Manager. Let's deselect our editable sphere. Let's come over to our Primitive Objects tab. Let's click and hold this, and let's select another sphere, another primitive sphere. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to bring this below, and we can disable it for now. And let's bring up our new editable sphere again. And now let's double click that texture, and let's come down to the texture area of our color section, and let's right click, and let's come to copy. Now that we've copied the texture layer from our color channel, let's come over to our basic tab, and then come down to alpha and check alpha. Next, let's come up to our alpha tab, and let's come down to texture, right click, and select paste. So you'll see it's acting as a mask on top of our editable sphere with the extruded surfaces that create that bump. Now there's just a few things I want to point out. Now by default mine was set to invert, but I know that that's not always the case for some. For some it may be set to soft and alpha image or image alpha. So if these two are checked, be sure to uncheck them and select invert. And the reason why is because if soft and image alpha are selected, it'll still reveal part of the extruded surfaces of our editable sphere when we re-enable this sphere underneath our editable sphere. So just make sure that invert is checked and not soft and image alpha. So now that we've done that, let's come back over to our color channel. Let's come down to texture, and with this arrow button, let's select that and then select clear, because we no longer need that image to be on our color channel. Now we can adjust the colors of the material applied to our editable sphere. So for the sake of consistency, I'm just going to make this orange like a standard basketball color is. So now that I've done that, I'm going to come back up to our Objects Manager, and I'm going to re-enable this new sphere that we brought on the scene. So just click the radio buttons of this primitive sphere, just click those once so they're no longer red. And that will reveal the editable sphere, or I'm sorry, the primitive sphere underneath our editable sphere. Now there's just a few adjustments we need to make to this primitive sphere. So with our primitive sphere selected, let's come down to the Attributes tab and then the Object tab of our primitive sphere. Next, we want to adjust the radius, and we just want to change the radius from 100 centimeters to 99.9 centimeters. Now I'm going to zoom in here and show you exactly why we did that. So I'm going to zoom all the way in, and then I'm just going to orbit around, and you can see we needed to essentially reduce the size or the radius of that sphere so it wasn't intersecting with our editable sphere. So now that we've done that, it shouldn't overlap. So now what we want to do is we just want to apply another material on top of this primitive sphere that we just edited. So let's go ahead and come over here to Create, New Material, and now let's drag and drop this new material on top of this primitive sphere. And now let's double click the new material that's been applied to our primitive sphere, and I'm just going to reduce this color to a darker color. There we go, that looks great. And now that I've done that, I'm going to do a quick RAM preview. So if you're on a Mac, go ahead and press Command R. If you're on a PC, Control R. So that looks pretty good. So now I do want to address a couple things. Now, again, there have been some people who've asked about, how we light our scenes, and like in the thumbnails. And this is actually the first reveal of SceneLight. So for those of you who are curious about what SceneLight is, be sure to stick around because I'm going to reveal what that looks like. So to do that, I need to adjust some of the render settings in our scene. So let's go ahead and come up here to render. You don't need to follow along with this because we're pretty much done with the tutorial at this point, and nobody has SceneLight yet, at least nobody who's not part of the controlled user group. So I'm going to come up here to render, and I'm going to select the edit render settings, and I'm going to change this from the renderer from standard to physical. And I'm going to make sure that anti-aliasing is selected, and I'm going to change the filter from cubic still image to Mitchell. Next, I'm going to come down to effect and change this to, or add ambient occlusion, and then effect again and add global illumination. Next, I'm going to come to physical, and I want my blurriness subdivision to be 3, my shadow subdivision to be 3, and my ambient occlusion subdivision to be 3. I also want to change my sampling quality from low to automatic. And if I was going to do a still image render, I would reduce my shading error threshold to 10% instead of 20%. But because this is just a preview, I'm just going to keep it 20%. So I'm going to close out of that. I'm also going to just kind of pull back in scene a little bit. I do want to do one more RAM or render preview. So just Command R if you're on a Mac, Control R if you're on a PC. So you'll see, because we don't have any lighting applied to our scene, it's just going to be black. So now that that's happened, we want to come up here to Window, Content Browser, and if you had SceneLight, you would see it in the Content Browser in your presets. So I'm going to actually select SceneLight Plus because there are 2 versions of SceneLight that we'll be making available. SceneLight Plus has all of the same parameters that SceneLight has with 3 additional features. So I'm going to double click that, and that will bring SceneLight on our scene. And I'm going to deselect SceneLight in our Objects Manager. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to Create, Object, and select Null. And now I'm going to select my subdivision surface, which has our editable sphere, and then hold down the Command key if I'm on a Mac, Control key if you're on a PC, and select our primitive sphere as well, and click and drag and drop these in the null object. So now that I've dropped those in the null object, I'm just going to drag this basketball up ever so slightly. I'm going to bring it up a little bit more. And now I'm going to come back to SceneLight, and I'm just going to adjust the scale of a few things. That looks good. Now SceneLight Plus has a few features that regular SceneLight doesn't have. It has a toggle between your essentially a sky parameter, an artificial sky parameter, or you can select HDRI, which it'll convert to an HDRI parameter, which is what we want. Now SceneLight, regular SceneLight has the HDRI parameter standard, but SceneLight Plus, you get an artificial sky parameter if you want that. And it also has a sun parameter, so I'm going to enable that. And it also has a haze. I'm going to leave the haze off for now, but I am going to grab an HDRI light source. So I'm going to come up to HDRI, select those three dots, and I'm going to come to HDRI resources, and let's grab something. That looks good. Let's just grab that. Now, by default, I'm just going to zoom around so you can see what's happening. You can see the HDRI has been applied to the scene, and there's our artificial sun. So now I'm just going to do a quick RAM preview. And there we have it. So this is SceneLight. And for those of you who are interested in learning more about SceneLight, or who are interested in buying SceneLight, we will be making it available, and it will have a sale price once it drops. We're hoping to release it, no later than June. But yeah, this is pretty much it. This is the completed basketball tutorial. So if you enjoyed this tutorial, don't forget to like and subscribe, and also be sure to hit that notification bell as well. That way you're notified once you've subscribed of any new video tutorials that we post. And also be sure to follow us on Instagram as well. We post all our renders are essentially derived from using our SceneLight plugin, and so you can get an idea of what that looks like and its capabilities. You can see the end results on our Instagram account. Other than that, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it, and I will see you in the next tutorial. See you then.